Hey, what's going on, guys? So for today's Mook review, we're going to be taking a look at Whimsical Gunpla production notes here, and this is going to be a really interesting one that I think that you guys will like a lot. This one, as I mentioned before, was recommended to me, so thank you to whoever recommended it to me for the heads up on this. Otherwise, I probably would have missed it, but this one has a lot of really cool stuff in here. It says on the front that it's not a how-to book, but there's going to be... It's not necessarily showing like this is how you do it, but more this is how I did it. And so it's kind of ends up being the same thing. I mean, it's still basically kind of showing you here's some ideas about how you can make some different modifications and stuff to your Gunpla, and painting in here as well. So some of the stuff is modifications on then not painting the kit or doing some painting. Some of the stuff in here is fully painted. So there's a good mix of a lot of things here that I think that we all can learn from. So let's go ahead and check out this book. So right here on this very wonderful cover art design, you can kind of get a sense of what we're going to get in here, which is like a lot of interesting and pastel-y kind of colors, desaturated colors, as you'll see in a lot of these builds that we're going to be taking a look at throughout this Mook. The author of this one, which I would imagine this is a photograph of him here, is Seira Masuo, and that is also mentioned in the notes in the back of the last page here. We have all the staff and everything, but the list price for this one, MSRP, is 1,600 yen, so that puts it around $14, something like that, which is very reasonable for what you get in this one. It's pretty standard size in terms of thickness. Let's see the page count. It's over 100 pages, so about 112, 113 pages, something like that. Not too bad at all. Underneath the jacket, the cover art is the same photo and title, just without some of the other coloring and everything on there. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So we've got our contents here right at the start, but let's see. So there's our Freedom Gundam. First of all, this is just kind of, I think, going to be introducing some basic tools there, knives, and other tools here. Okay, so it looks like, yeah, introduction is just kind of the standard tools that he's using, which are all kind of standard stuff, files, mini, like micro saws, caliper, like a punch poking tool there, different kinds of nippers, paint trays, tweezers, drills, paintbrushes, top coat, all the kind of standard stuff. Okay, so first off, this is the HGCE Revive Ale Strike Gundam here, and we got a really nice image showing the before and after modification over here, and I would imagine that this is also not fully painted. As I said, I know a couple of the builds in here, just leafing through it beforehand, a couple of them are fully painted, but the rest are not. Anyway, so obviously there is some detail painting in there, but this is mostly just going to be some modifications. So a lot of what's the focus of this is simple modification with like very few different like tools and supplies and stuff like that. So I think that that's why this was covering this at the start, just showing like these are the tools that I use. It's all really basic and nothing fancy at all, and so he's basically using just plot plate when needed, but a lot of times just using plastic from the runner. So when he's adding these little detail parts and things around on the kit, he's just cutting up the actual runner itself because the color matches, and then you don't need to paint it, because like if he wants to add some detail onto the blue section of the kit, just cut some plastic off of the blue part of the runner, and once you glue it on there and kind of sand it a little bit, then the color's basically going to match. So here he's just cutting up little bits of plot plate, it looks like, to add some details around on some different parts of the kit. Up here on the shoulders, for example, around here on the skirting section, on the feet there as well, that'll obviously need to be painted, but that will, let's see, again, just using little bits of, I would guess that's off the runner because it's black, but like cutting these really thin strips of that to make basically like your 1mm plastic square rods, essentially, but that looks even smaller than 1mm. They're really small. Just adding little parts onto there, you can just glue them on and just kind of cut and sand it off. Adding some little bits, added detail, just by gluing little pieces of plot plate and stuff onto there. There is a little bit of scribing in here as well, which it looks like there's not really too much mention about the scribing in this part, but I know it'll talk a little bit more about that later. But here is basically the end when it's all done, just pre-painting, and then he's gone in and done some painting on it. What it looks like that also for this one, it's also not going to get into the painting aspect, but we'll talk some more about that in some future sections, it looks like. But here's the final product. Looks really cool. I do like the addition of the little kind of yellow around the chest vents there. It's a very dull yellow. Like I said, as you'll see, like it seems like his preferred color scheme is always going to be kind of very desaturated like that, and that kind of almost like tannish yellow color is pretty nice. there for some added detail. And that kind of reminds me, now the chest kind of reminds me a bit of the Impulse Gundam there. So a little bit of modification like to this chest part here. I would imagine that's just to make that easier to paint or easier to remove, to modify or whatever, I suppose. But we got a bunch more photos here of that, front, back, side, before and after shots here, action poses over here. It looks really good. I mean, just goes to show what you can do by just, you know, adding some detail, and you don't even necessarily have to fully paint the kit, and you can get a really good result. All right, so now getting into like the main section of the book, I guess. This is all custom builds that we're going to be seeing all throughout the book here as well. So after that brief introduction, this kind of gives you an idea of what to expect. A lot of really cool stuff, and again, all very desaturated. That's not like just this image, that's what actually all the builds look like. So they're all going to be pretty similar. So here we have the HGCE Freedom Gundam. This would be the one that's on the front here. So again, you can see he's just got like scraps of runner that he's using for his parts to add the details. Cutting like the round parts to make them square so that you can use them as, you know, like square pieces of plastic, basically. Using a file to kind of shave the proportions a bit here and there on like the side of the torso. It looks like, I know that's another thing. Aside from adding details, another thing that is covered quite a bit in here is just going to be like proportion changes and modifications just by cutting, filing, and, you know, very kind of, what would be the word for it? Kind of somewhat crude methods, I guess, if we were talking like very technically. Not the methods that you would typically see in like your standard how-to book, which I guess is why it's saying like it's not a how-to book, because this is like all the kind of methods which are typically thought of to be a bit more kind of crude, I guess, but it just goes to show that, you know, with the right amount of finesse, even those crude methods can give you really good results. You just have to just kind of know how to do it properly, right? So that's why it's really interesting to see this. It's sort of like seeing Gunpla modification in a little bit different perspective, which is really interesting. And I mean, hey, as long as you're able to get really cool looking results, then I think, in my opinion, it doesn't really matter necessarily what your methods are or how you do it. And I think that's a great way to kind of go about it. And that you know, there's a lot of quote unquote like professional methods and ways to go about your modifications and everything. But at the end of the day, you're trying to get something that looks cool. And as long as you're able to achieve that, I think that it all works out, and it definitely looks really good. I mean, at first glance, you would think it's a master grade, I think, but it looks really, really nice here. So again, we're not really seeing a whole lot about the painting. There's a little bit kind of down here showing it going from unpainted to painted, but as far as I can tell, it does look like it's not fully painted. It's just partially painted. Like most of the white especially is all just the original white. Probably just had to, you know, he added some little yellow details again, like with the strike, but otherwise just kind of covering parts where he added the plot plate to it, so he had to kind of cover that to make it match. Okay, now on to the HGUC Delta Kai. Beautiful kit, but he's going to make it even better, I think, with his custom color scheme, which is pretty awesome. I gotta say, that green color scheme on the Delta Kai here looks awesome. I do love those original very Katoki colors on it, but once again, he's just doing some modifications here around the neck, it looks like, cutting that part out, maybe to just make it so that the head can be pointed down a bit more there in the neck. Yeah, adding a joint there in the neck where I believe the original kit doesn't have that. It's just like a solid, not movable. This is a single ball joint where he wanted to make it like a double joint in the neck, it looks like to me. Some other different modifications here to the midsection, to the shoulder armor. Now we're getting into some paint. Now it appears, I believe, all throughout the book that he does all of his painting just by hand painting acrylic paints. So that's also a little bit different perspective. Normally we see stuff like this, you know, stuff that's done to this level is usually airbrushed for the most part, and with like lacquer paints and kind of your standard paint stuff. But this one again is a little bit different in that he hand paints everything with acrylic, and it does kind of show it how you have to just paint it kind of very loosely and just kind of build up your layers. Painting, hand painting acrylics very different from hand painting lacquers or of course airbrushing. It's something that I know a lot of people do. I've just never really done it. I've never really gone to take the experience of trying it. Although I guess I probably should try it at some point. I'm just kind of comfortable with what I know how to do, but this is kind of all going step by step about kind of building up your paint layers, even on colors where like painting this kind of light greenish color over white, obviously going to be pretty easy, but painting it over like this darker purplish blue color, it's going to give you a little bit different results. So you probably have to build the layers up a bit more on whatever kind of base color, because he's also not using any kind of primer. So that's also something kind of interesting here where, you know, normally it's pretty generally thought of that you should use some sort of surfacer. He's just opting not to. So this kind of goes to show that you can, but like I always say, it's just one of those things. You can opt to not use surfacer, primer, or whatever. It's not generally recommended, but you know, there's no strict rules for any of this stuff, you know. Like I was saying before, it's just about getting good results. And so this is all painting the eyes, and let's see, some other details on the face. Nope, that's basically it, just the eyes, around the eyes, I think a little bit. Kind of our last step here, once all the painting's done, adding some decals on it, and we're done. HJ original version, I would assume that's a Hobby Japan. I don't know if maybe this was featured in a different issue of Hobby Japan previously, but got some more photos of that, so some action shots, even transformed over here. Really cool color scheme with the added details and everything. It does look really nice, and here we have the before and after images up there, and you can just see the color scheme change on its own is really cool, but the other just slight modifications and added details and everything are really nice on that. So sticking with HG, where I think most of this is HG. Let's see, we even got the Nightingale here, which I believe is also HG. I think everything, yep. I think everything for the most part, I believe, is going to be HGUC in here. Or HG, I should say. I guess we had the HGCE earlier. But anyway, 1/44 scale HG. So here we have the HG Hainu. And we're going to be doing some more modifications to this. Looks like, again, a modification on the neck joint, on the torso, which seems to be where he prefers to start. I don't know if that's just how it's arranged here, if that's like actually how it was done in order when it was done, or that's just how he's chosen to arrange it as far as like what's here in the book. But starting with the like torso and the kind of shoulder joints here, making some modifications in here to the torso to add better articulation for the shoulder joints, it looks like, from what the kit had originally. Just using your cut off pieces of runner for pegs there for the new shoulder joints, for where those are going to be plugging into there. Extending the proportions down a little bit on the bottom of the torso armor there, like under the cockpit hatch. Doing some scribing here a little bit, or actually chiseling out some of that detail. So kind of adding, like chiseling out like a shelf there, if that makes sense, kind of on the front of the torso there. So like bringing down that part for the top of the torso, and that creates kind of a detail around that section like that. A little bit knee modification, skirt modification, again cutting those off and adding plop plate detail kind of building around the side of the skirt armor. So again, just kind of not necessarily cutting it up or removing anything, but just adding parts around what's already existing there and just kind of making it all blend in together. Same thing here for the side skirts. The feet, just kind of reshaping those a bit with the file. Cutting off the face plate over here. Again, pretty common modification in order to make it easier to paint the face. So you just cut off the face, and then you can paint that, and then once it's painted, it's easier to then just pop it into the head there. Really interesting modifications here around the head. Added this kind of like detail here on the side. This kind of little fin going around the side of the head there, it looks like. Or I guess that's just to create like a more defined vent around the side of the head, which is nice. Some more just details added around on the backpack, on the shield, here on the beam rifle as well, kind of adding extra parts onto the tip of that to make the tip, rather than just like one solid cylinder piece, you kind of add like stacked a couple parts together there to make the tip look a bit more detailed. It's kind of difficult to see maybe in that picture. Let's see if it's easier to see a different picture. Sort of. Anyway, you can kind of see that the barrel tip is more detailed now, like with the rest of the suit. So that does look really cool. And again, not fully painted. So you can see up here the before and after. And it's quite the difference of just how good that looks, just from all the different modifications and stuff. All right, now onto the HGC Nightingale. He's going very big with this kit. Starting off once again with some neck joint modification here, some modifications on the head, like cutting off this little fin that kind of sticks down there, just reshaping that detail a little bit there on the head. Adding some detail here, what's that? Or cutting this detail here to make, I guess this is the back skirt, to make that be extended a little bit farther back. Then let's see. So yeah, here's kind of about just extending the proportions of the torso, front and back a little bit. So adding some space in there. He's also shortening the length of the binders out over the back. So just cut out a section and then, so just cut, and then just remove the middle section and just glue it back together like that. A lot of times when you do that, it's not gonna match up quite exactly the size. So then you'll have to do some like putty work or something, or just do it in a way that you can turn it into a detail, which looks like maybe is probably what he's going to do with that. Also the crotch part, which is very long, you know, he cut out a section of that to make that shorter as well. Actually a couple parts, and then also kind of change the angle of it a little bit, cutting a V, and then you can kind of adjust the angle to have that sticking out a little bit differently. So again, just cutting stuff here and there to change the proportions of it, just to make it a bit more unique. Not necessarily like better or worse, I mean, because it's all subjective, you know, what you prefer in terms of like the proportions, but I can appreciate it, because basically what he's doing is just, you know, is just making it his own, which is kind of what it's all about, right? You're just making it to be something unique, and you know, whether you like it or not is all just a personal thing, the changes to the proportions or the details. So he's going in, adding some scribing details around here and there, scribing details, drawing it in with a pencil first, measuring stuff out with a caliper to make sure that everything's kind of even, and then going along with a compass to scribe that, to make like the original scribe marks, and then probably going over it a bit more with a scriber just to make that a bit more clean, scribing on that. Then it looks like getting into the painting, so he's going for like a Zeong kind of inspired color scheme for this, it seems like, sort of, kind of, with the blue kind of torso and shoulders and the kind of gray. It's kind of like that, right? Zeong inspired. So we're just talking about the painting of it, building up your colors, and especially the yellow trim. He does like, seems like he very much likes having that pale, dull yellow for a detail like trim color, and I like it. Yeah, it looks really cool. I do really like that yellow accent around on the binders, and then just the white accent kind of around everywhere else as well, underneath the legs, or around the edge of the legs, around the edge of the back skirt. Really, really cool looking. So I do really like the finished results on this. Those colors are just really nice. So you can see the before and after. And yeah, I mean, like a lot of the changes, I mean, we saw how he cut and reshaped and like changed the angle and everything on that front dong piece right there. I mean, looking at them side to side, it's not super obvious, the change, but I mean, it's only once you know the work that's been put into it that you can tell that there's been, you know, quite a significant section cut out of that. But just looking at them side to side, I mean, it's not that you wouldn't like immediately recognize it. Even the binders as well. And you could chalk that up to basically just kind of the angle of the pose is slightly different, so this one looks shorter, but we know that seeing the work in progress was actually like a significant portion of that binder part that was cut out and removed from there. So here we have just some more comparison photos showing before and after. And yeah, it looks like for where he cut that section out of the binder, he didn't try to like meld it smoothly, but he just turned that where they match up and they don't quite match up correctly, he just turned that into a detail. So you can kind of see it right over here. Maybe you can see it a little bit better up on this one. Right there, where the two parts of the binder are reattached. He just made that into a detail section, and I think works out really nicely. Looks like he also has the sub arms there with the beam sabers underneath the front skirt. Very cool. All right, now we're getting into 1/100 scale here. Although it's not HD, it's not 144 scale, still a pretty small model kit, so it's gone up to 1/100 scale, but not necessarily that much larger of a model, especially compared to the Nightingale. The Nightingale's a much bigger model kit than the RE100. What was I gonna say? Gun Easy. I was thinking Regazy, no, Easy 8, no, I knew it's something with the Z. Gun Easy. Anyway, yes. So all right. So going to his scrap bin. So this is something that I think probably a lot of us have. I definitely have one, a box full of just leftover parts and things. So going to the scrap bin, finding some parts that you think might work, and then just kind of going through, adding the parts onto there where you think that they might look kind of cool. Putting some different parts together to make kind of a backpack, what he's making here with this. that can act as sort of like guns, sort of similar to like the Vignagina there, and then start on some modifications, putting stuff together to make it all work. So again, just a whole bunch of different modifications and stuff here. This is interesting. What's this? Looks like he's making a kind of putty filler. Kind of difficult to tell here, but what I think that this is that he's got these like little containers that looks like it's just filled with like plastic shavings. So like when you're filing, you know, it's making all of that little plastic dust. Looks like he's then like collecting that to use later as like a putty, because then he's just putting on this wax paper. It looks like you just put some glue down and put that in there and just mix it up, and it basically makes like a plastic putty. And then you can use that for filling holes and things like that. Pretty ingenious. I wouldn't think to ever keep those the plastic dust, the plastic shavings and stuff for that. I guess that's not true. I have done it before, but not like to this degree of organization. But I have done that when I needed to like fill a little detail or something, like a little bit of a seam or something that's, you know, has, I already filled it and there's still a teeny tiny bit of there. I have done that, like putting some glue in it and then like sprinkling some shavings on there just to kind of fill in a little bit. Anyway, adding parts onto here to customize this, and here you can kind of see how it's coming along, where at the moment, I mean, it still looks very rough there, but you can kind of get the sense of how it's shaping up to look with these parts and everything added onto there. He's added like skirt parts there onto the shoulders. Those are like shoulder parts stacked on top of the original shoulder parts. Other parts there on the side of the leg. I think those are from the Aegis, it looks like, maybe, possibly. Added onto the side of the leg there. The backpack is just a whole bunch of different mishmashed parts there all put together. Some modifications here around on the head, reshaping that part there at the front of the head there a little bit. Adding some parts here onto the front skirts. And there, again, before and after, these parts are added on the legs. Before and after here, zooming in on this part here on the legs as well. And all this is basically you have this kind of section which was looking kind of like there's a kind of a gap between the original part and the part that he's added on there. They don't match up quite right, and so what he's done is just put a bunch of little detail parts in there to fill it in, just to make it look like it's a detailed section of the build. So that's really pretty ingenious. He just like had a bunch of little rectangular pieces of plot plate and just kind of glued them all in there and just made it look really detailed. And in the finished result, yeah, it looks like, you know, it's just a mechanical detail of that. So that's pretty cool. Really like that. Here's how it looks once it's all fully painted up. Again, sticking with the kind of, I was gonna say again with the green color scheme like we saw with the Delta Kai, but the original kit is green, so he's basically kind of stuck with the original color scheme here mostly. But this is obviously very different looking Gun Easy here from what it is originally. Much more, well, it's still Universal Century, but it looks much more like something you would see as like a unicorn version, like 96, 97 UC era kind of year of the Gun Easy, sort of like that. Yeah, really, really cool. Pretty amazing what he's done like with the backpack there as well. So just goes to show, you know, just mashing a bunch of parts together, and then once you get it all painted up and get it pretty cohesive looking, can end up looking pretty impressive here with this. So that's really, really cool. Really interesting work on that. Those are like legs there for the backpack, is what's basically like at the center of, not like the physical center, but at the center of the modification to those cannons on the backpack. It's just like legs essentially. So very, very interesting stuff. Up next, now we're moving into a full-on 1/100 scale MG with the origin version of the ARC 7802 here. Fantastic master grade. And it looks like he's going for making this something sort of like the perfect Gundam, using some parts, well, again, just this is just a lot of different random parts, but using some parts from what looks like a Rigazi there for these parts for the legs, and the shoulder parts, kind of a mix of things here, but it looks like it's mostly parts from the Rigazi, or Rezel, I should say. What am I talking about? Yeah, the Rezel is what I mean to say. They're these like standard commander type, whatever, master grade kits. So just basically taking a bunch of those parts and kind of just making them fit onto the Gundam to make it look like added armor, sort of like a full armor. So he's basically kind of making it into like a perfect Gundam, full armor Gundam. I guess is kind of like the theme, what he's going for. Yeah, perfect Gundam here. as you can see. So whereas like what we had with the other ones, it was about kit bashing parts onto it, and then we had like kit bashing parts just for added details, and like with this one, it's like adding a bunch of parts, kit bashing parts onto the kit, not to make it look necessarily like it's a modified kit, but more like that we're adding armor onto it, like which is the theme of like the Full Armor Gundam or the Perfect Gundam in this case. So if you imagine, it still has like the base kit in the center of it, the RX-782 is, you know, by and large unmodified, and what we're doing is basically just adding a bunch of armor sections onto it from other kits in this case. But so here's the finished result, and yeah, I mean, if you look at the Gundam itself, underneath everything that he's added onto it is all, you know, still probably mostly pretty original, and you can see that down here in the work in progress. So this is kind of the unpainted version right there. That big cannon on the back looks really cool. This is a really interesting build. It looks very cool, and it's quite interesting that so much of it looks like, for the most part, is all taken from the Roselle, and yeah, just all kind of modified and reshaped and repurposed on there to make. So yeah, here's the base Gundam inside, and then with everything added onto there. It's pretty impressive. Very cool. Love that color scheme. Again, like sticking with the original color scheme essentially of the Perfect Gundam, but very desaturated and kind of pastel in all the colors, which I like. I definitely like that. All right, here we've got the MG Freedom. So we saw the HG before, and now this is the MG. Now it's making me second guess which one is on the cover. I still think that's the HG though that we've got on the cover there, but I'm gonna fast forward a moment here. Maybe it is this one. Maybe it is the MG. Yeah, it is. It is the MG that's on the front, not the HG we saw before. Let me go ahead and just look back at that for a moment here. Okay, yeah. Looking at the details of it is definitely different. Like here on the shoulder, for example, you can just see right away. It's definitely the different one. Okay, anyway, so the Freedom Gundam here. Again, it's kind of similar steps to modification, adding detail parts onto here. Actually extending the proportions of this. So this is parts for the lower leg, I believe, making this wider by cutting it apart and adding some plot plate in between. And then you just kind of have to cut and sand that down to make those proportions extended out to the side. Modifications here on the face, it looks like cutting those parts, just kind of reshaping the parts a little bit here around the V-fin and the jewel on the front of the head. And for example, scribing details, chiseling details here around the skirt armor, adding details around the edge of the skirts. This is all very interesting stuff. A lot of things in here which I think are kind of right up my alley in terms of like kind of the kind of details that I might like to add. Not necessarily maybe to the same level, but I can definitely get some good ideas here from this, I think, for some future custom builds. So here we're getting into the painting. So again, sticking with the same original color scheme and not fully painting the kit, but painting some of the sections like the darker blue and the dark black is painted in, again, a little bit more lighter colors there for that. And then once the decals are on, we've got the finished product here. Some nice big photographs of that front and back, so you can see like this part here on the leg down there is where that was extended. So I think that was the part that we saw earlier that was made wider at the start, right? It's either the front or the back of the leg there, which is made wider just to make the legs a bit more bulky. So you can see, yeah, how thin the legs are originally on the original kit, and then after they have a much more wider, bulkier legs to it. Also, like the parts on the side of the leg, he basically like jacked those out for like the calf armor right there. Let's see, yeah, it looks like even the thigh armor as well. So he made the legs much more bulky, which I think suits the design pretty well. It looks nice. Got a couple action poses here of this where you can really see all the details and everything on there. Again, just looking at the before and after photos is quite interesting to see the changes to it. All right, and so this last section here I think is just a gallery of other works, so less of like the work in progress showing like step by step, but here's just some of his other works that are all going to be kind of done in a very similar way. So you can see we've got a Gerbera Tetra, a Shin Matsunaga's Gelgoog, down here a full weapons set Leo, a Wing Gundam, a Leo Space Type, and a GN 14, a GN XIV mass production type. So, all right, let's take a look just through these. So we've just got like a few photos of each of them just to kind of get a sense, but you can kind of really see around, and it's all kind of the same style. He certainly has his own kind of style here, his own aesthetic that he likes. This Gerbera Tetra is really cool. I really like that. The kind of changing of the shapes and kind of the feel of that, because the original Gerbera Tetra has, you know, this very sleek, round red, and it's bright red, so changing the color to this blue color and all this added detail, and making, especially around the head and the shoulders, still kind of keeping this somewhat round shape, but especially that rectangular kind of visor part added on the front of the head really changes the look of it quite a lot. And a rectangular part on the top of the backpack there as well, or kind of angular part, I guess I should say. The mass production type GNXIV, the GN14 here. Pretty funky color scheme with a mix of that mint green and like dark navy blue, dark gray, and kind of dark green. They're very interesting. Got the Wing Gundam here. This is the high grade. So I believe these are all high grades, by the way. It's all based on high grade kits. You can see some very familiar modifications on that, like we've seen in some of the other builds here in the book so far. That looks really cool. And our Leos, are two different Leos here, the space type and the full weapon set version of the Leos. Quite interesting modifications, especially on that full weapon set version of the Leo. Wow, that's pretty unique. Let's see. Yeah, wow, look at that. Very interesting, those parts there for the legs even. Those are really cool. Again, really cool color schemes for these, just very unique. And that is about it. Here at the end, it looks like we've got some special edition color sets. It looks like these are color sets based on the preferred color schemes here of Seira Masuo's colors, it looks like. All very desaturated pastel type of colors down there, which look really cool. Got some decals here, some detailed part sets, and some kits. Those are really interesting. Not sure I've ever really seen too much about those. But yeah, that's it. Okay, so there's a lot of really cool stuff in here. Wow, I'm really glad that I didn't miss this Mook, because I think there's a lot of really great tips in here. And even though it's not a how-to book, as it's stated on here, I think there's definitely a lot that you can learn from this. So it's not necessarily like teaching you, this is how you do this. It's more of like, this is how I did this. And I think that, yeah, as I said at the start, I think whether you're a beginner or a more advanced builder, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that you can, if you take the time and like really go through carefully and look through this, there's different ideas that you can get, a lot of motivation that you can get from a book like this. So highly recommended. Check it out, guys. If you want to check out some tools, paints, supplies, and of course the kits themselves, you can do that at the link in the video description, USA Gundam Store. We don't carry this book, but there are some other books on there on the website. So check the website. There is, if you go like on the side in the menu, there is a book section, and check there. We do have some books on like scribing and modification. But they're not from Hobby Japan, but you can check those out, guys, if you want. Otherwise, yeah, if you guys, normally when I review books like this, people always ask in the comments, where can they get books like this? Usually you have to order it directly from Japan, so just wherever any Japanese-based retailer that you can order from would probably have stuff like this. And thank you guys all so much for your support. If you like the video, leave a like. If you want to make sure that you see future episodes of the Mook reviews, or anything else here on the channel, make sure that you're subscribed. Thank you guys all so much for your support. I'll see you all next time. Bye, guys.